Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clay, and I am the Bucks believer. Last night, the Bucks wrapped up their first NBA championship in the past 50 years with a Game 6 win over the Phoenix Suns, just as I predicted in my series preview video. However, in that video, one of the biggest reasons why I was nervous about making that prediction was the Phoenix Suns offense. This past regular season, Phoenix was 6th in offensive rating, scoring 117.7 points per 100 possessions, and I thought that was a weapon that the Bucks were going to have a really difficult time stopping. Phoenix does a great job of running complicated actions, as Coach Monty Williams has tons of sets involving difficult sets to guard, including the Spain pick and roll and double drag screens and pin down sets for the Suns' best shooters. And throughout the season, it has left opposing defenses confused and afraid of how they could possibly defend this absolute unit of a Suns offense. Fortunately for Milwaukee, in this series, they were somewhat able to solve this complicated Phoenix offense, as in this series, the Suns scored just 113.3 points per 100 possessions, an entire 4.4 points per 100 possessions less than they averaged throughout the regular season. In this series, the Bucks made a couple really huge adjustments to figure out how to defend the Suns, and I think that is one of the single largest reasons why the Bucks were able to win this series. In Game 1, Milwaukee didn't get off to the best start. They obviously lost 118 to 105, but they were particularly poor on the defensive end of the court, where they surrendered 118 points to the Suns on just 100 possessions. This actually doesn't even tell the entire story, as Phoenix didn't have the best shooting night. According to the shot quality metric on shotquality.com, the Suns should have actually scored closer to 125 points in this game, but they weren't able to hit some open shots, and that led to them not scoring as many. However, they were still able to comfortably win with a huge night, and a big reason for that was the scheme in which the Bucks defended the pick and roll. They came out in a switch everything look, where even Brook Lopez was being switched out onto the Suns guards, and that led to Chris Paul and Devin Booker both having huge nights, with Paul having a 31-point outburst and Booker scoring 27 points of his own. This was a tough game for the Bucks defense, as they were only able to force 9 turnovers. This would be an area where they would really look to improve by ramping up the pressure in the rest of the series, but I'll get to that a little bit later. In addition to the lack of turnovers and the easy shots for the Suns' best players, the Bucks also were not necessarily maximizing what they could get out of their rotation, as they played Bryn Forbes 12 minutes in this game. Forbes wasn't terrible for the Bucks, as he had 5 points, but he was consistently targeted on the defensive end of the court, and we saw Booker and Paul generate some of their easiest buckets off of being defended by Forbes after an easy switch. After that, Forbes didn't play as much, as in the next game, Game 2, Bryn played 6 minutes, but he struggled in those minutes, and from there on out, Mike Budenholzer completely benched Forbes, as he did not make another appearance in the rest of the series following the conclusion of Game 2. Game 2 was a much better defensive game for the Bucks. They still lost this game, as the Suns scored a whopping 118 points on just 93 possessions, which translates to a 126.9 offensive rating. That would have ranked more than 7 points better than the Brooklyn Nets offensive rating this regular season, which was best in the entire NBA. However, according to shotquality.com's shot quality metric, as you'll notice, I'm going to go to this statistic a lot. The Suns should have scored just 104 points in this game. That would have given Milwaukee a 4-point victory, but unfortunately for the Bucks, the Suns had an outlier shooting performance, going 20 for 40 from beyond the 3-point arc. This success shooting the basketball led to Phoenix winning a game that they probably should have lost based on the quality of their shots, and the combination of Phoenix making every shot they took, along with Chris Middleton struggling en route to a 5 for 16 performance, meant that the Bucks lost a game that they probably should have won based on how well they defended. In this game, the Bucks started to ramp up the pressure as they forced Phoenix into 3 more turnovers than Game 1, but it still hadn't reached the climax that it would reach in the rest of the series. Game 3 was the start of the real adjustment when it came to the defensive aggression. Jrue Holiday began picking Chris Paul up full court, and whenever Jrue was out of the game, Jeff Teague took on that role as a full court defender on Chris Paul. This led to Paul really struggling en route to having 4 turnovers turnovers, a very uncharacteristic thing for him to do, and the Suns as a whole committed 14 turnovers as they really played some sloppy basketball. The Bucks were fantastic on the defensive end of the court in this game, as in non-garbage time minutes, they held the Suns to just 94 points on 89 possessions, which translates to a 104.5 offensive rating. This would have ranked 29th in the NBA this past regular season, ahead of only the Oklahoma City Thunder, who won just 22 games. That's a far cry from the Game 2 performance from Phoenix, where they were by far the best offense in the NBA as it would translate to the regular season. So clearly the Bucks had found something when it came to forcing all of those turnovers. One of the biggest reasons why the Suns played so poorly on offense was some struggles from Devin Booker, as he had an outlier shooting night in a negative way, scoring just 10 points on 3 for 14 shooting from the field and 1 for 7 shooting from the three-point line. But with their constant pressure on the Suns' guards, the Bucks had clearly found a recipe for success in this series, and that would continue into Game 4, where Booker really ended up bouncing back. He had 42 points on 17 for 28 shooting from the field and 8 for 9 shooting from the free throw line, but it didn't matter as the Suns still lost this game as they committed 17 turnovers, including 5 for Chris Paul, who once again struggled with the full court defense that was provided by Jrue Holiday. This was one of the Suns' worst offensive games of the entire series, as they scored just 103 points on 97 possessions. Sorry for the hammering in the background. There's some work being done on our roof, but the Bucks had a really nice defensive game in this one as they ramped up the aggression to the max and forced all of those turnovers from Phoenix, and that's a big reason why they were able to even up the series at 2 games apiece. As the series headed back to Phoenix, the Bucks were going to have to defend even better as they did on their home court. In the playoffs, teams tend to shoot better on their home court than they do in away games, and that was certainly true in Game 5 for the Suns, as they went a ridiculous 13 for 19 from the three-point line, which translates to 68.4%. League average on three-point shots this season was 36%, so the Suns shot a whopping 32% above average. This obviously was on a small sample size, as Phoenix just shot 19 three-pointers, which is a far cry from the 40 three-point shots that they shot in Game 2, and so because of that, the Bucks were still able to recover. They forced Devin Booker to take a lot of shots, and once again, Booker had those falling as he scored his second consecutive 40-point game, putting in 40 points on 17 for 33 shooting. This led to the Suns having another really nice offensive game, scoring 119 points on 92 possessions, which translates to a 129.3 offensive rating. Fortunately for the Bucks, they were still able to come away with a win in this one, as they also had a fantastic shooting performance, but they clearly needed to play better defense in Game 6, and they actually did. The Bucks held the Suns to just 98 points on 102 possessions, which is a 96.1 offensive rating. That is by far the worst offensive rating that the Suns posted in this entire series, and the Bucks defense played a huge role in that. The Suns' turnover amount once again spiked up to 14 turnovers, as Milwaukee did a great job of putting pressure on not just Chris Paul, but also Devin Booker. Coach Mike Budenholzer made a massive adjustment, taking Jrue Holiday, the Bucks' best perimeter hound, and putting him on Booker instead of Paul. And this led to Booker going from his back-to-back 40-point performances, where he shot better than 50% from the field, to a very inefficient 19 points on 8 for 22 shooting and 0 for 7 shooting from the three-point line. Holiday's constant pressure also got to Booker when it came to turning the ball over, as D-Book committed 6 turnovers in this game, including some costly ones for the Suns in the fourth quarter. Overall, Coach Mike Budenholzer made some monster adjustments throughout this series. In Game 1, the Bucks really struggled to execute a switching scheme involving Brook Lopez, so after that game, Bud completely erased the switching defense with Brook and instead had him playing in a slight drop. However, in Game 2, the Suns really killed that drop, so the Bucks didn't bring Brook Lopez back so far, and instead he was playing closer to the level of the screen. In addition to those adjustments, the Bucks also completely erased the minutes from Bryn Forbes, which was very key in limiting the Suns' guards from being able to erupt against switches. Budenholzer also put more pressure on the Suns' ball handlers, which forced them into more turnovers. And finally, in Game 6, he made the biggest adjustment of the series, putting Holiday on Booker instead of Paul, forcing D-Book into his worst shooting performance basically since Game 3. So I think that Budenholzer did a fantastic job in this game, and this is just one small example of the fantastic coaching that Coach Bud brought to the Bucks in this playoffs. Yes, his rotation wasn't always perfect, but he did do a nice job of getting his best players on the court for 40 plus minutes a night, which had been a critique for him coming into these playoffs. He also struggled a little bit to get this team to be playing well on the offensive end of the court, as too frequently they would end up playing iso ball and taking bad shots without trying to force mismatches. However, Budenholzer's genius on the defensive end of the court really shined through, both in this series and in the playoffs as a whole, as he ran completely different defensive schemes in the Round 1 series against the Miami Heat, the Round 2 series against the Brooklyn Nets, the Conference Finals against the Atlanta Hawks, and finally the NBA Finals against the Phoenix Suns. Budenholzer is probably the best defensive coach in the entire NBA, and he certainly proved that in these playoffs. The Bucks ranked number 1 in defensive rating, and they ranked an entire 1.1 points per possession ahead of any other team in the playoffs. So you have to certainly tip your cap to the Bucks personnel for executing Budenholzer's schemes, but I also give Bud a lot of credit, and considering that he's been a bit of a scapegoat for Milwaukee throughout the course of this current run, I think that he definitely deserves his flowers en route to this championship, and if anyone is saying that the Bucks should still fire him despite winning this championship, they are straight up wrong. Budenholzer has established himself as a top 5 or so coach in the entire NBA, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he can make improvements as an offensive coach heading into next season, because that's clearly the side of the court where the Bucks need to make the largest improvement. Thank you all for watching this video and for watching throughout this season. I didn't get into this too much in yesterday's video, but I'm really appreciative to all the fans who have been watching these videos. It's been a lot of fun covering this Bucks team, and I'm so happy that they were able to win this championship. Be sure to let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of this game. In your opinion, what was the biggest adjustment that the Bucks made on the defensive end of the court during this series? Also, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, especially if you are a fellow Bucks believer. This is the place for you. I think that I've covered everything that I wanted to cover, so that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.